Welcome, Comms 532. My name is Yolanda Goff, and today I'm going to be talking to you about Chapter 8 in our textbooks, the radio and digital audio. Next slide. Can you believe that with all of the advancement of technology that radio has managed to survive over 100 years? Who would ever thought? Who would ever even imagine, especially with the rapid pace of change? As Dr. Martin pointed out earlier at the beginning of the class, that the only thing that's constant in this type of business is change, and that change happens at a fast pace. And think about the television and the telephone and how they've evolved and continually find ways to reinvent themselves. However, when it comes to radio, I tend to think of it more as the story of the rabbit and the tortoise, if you will. Radio being the tortoise. It seems to have been moving at a very slow pace if you compare the advancements of television and the telephone. It's evolving, but again, as I say, at a slow pace. But I believe that it's been able to survive because radio tends to capture the heart of our attention through imagination. When you listen to a radio broadcast, you have to use your imagination, even if it's a commercial or if it's a news event or a story being told. You have to completely come up with the visual on your own, and I think that's what has been allowing us to help keep radio alive to this day. Next slide. Reginald Resident was credited with producing the first radio broadcast. It was heard in 1906 when he played "O Holy Night," and then he read a passage of a Bible scripture, if you will, to a group of seamen. This all happened with the song of "O Holy Night" and the scriptures. It was broadcast on a ship, but this laid the groundwork for radio as we know it today. Several years later, the first news broadcast hit the airways in Detroit, Michigan in 1920. WWJ was the name of that radio station, and to this day it can be heard on 9:50 a.m. and it's Detroit's only 24-hour news broadcast. So talk about weathering the storm and able to survive while everything else is changing around you. Kudos to WWJ. Between 1930 and 1940 was what was considered the golden age of radio. About 60% of the households had radios. And by now, between the 30s and 40s, over 1 million cars were manufactured with radios inside of them. So that's how they were able to keep it up and keep the radio industry booming. And by this time, between the 30s and the 40s, it was multiple programming. It wasn't just music and news. They had kid programs for when they came home after school and to listen to a little radio. And then also on Saturday mornings they had programming out there for the children. They also had dramas and soap operas on the radio, and comedy was a big hit. As a matter of fact, during those times, there was a famous comedy broadcast, Andy and Amos, or Amos and Andy. And I read that this comedy program was so popular that the local movie theaters wouldn't even open their doors until after that comedy show was over. Wow, talk about owning the brands. Next slide. So radio's popularity began to trickle down just a little bit by the end of World War II with the advancement of television. Now with TV, we have something that's able to capture our imagination through visual. So that's becoming a little bit more popular now than just listening to on the radio. So radio took a little bit of a downfall during this time period. However, in the 1950s, the first DJ, or the disc jockey, was born, and the popular America's Top 40 ruled the airways, and this is back in 1950. And what I remember about America's Top 40 is that, you know, I'm from a military background, and sometimes you're not going to get some of the popular radio stations that you were accustomed to back home. But I do remember, no matter if I was in Europe or if I was in the States, we always got to listen to America's Top 40. So that's another way that radio has seemed to weather the storm with broadcasting. By the 1970s, FM technology was dominating. It provided a better reception. You have a better quality of sound that was coming through. And pretty much to this day, I guarantee you most Americans or most, not just America, but most people in general, when they're listening to the radio station, their favorites tend to be on an FM station and then the AM broadcasts. Now, during the 80s and the 90s, while FM radio was booming, digital technology was being developed. But we're going to talk about more. We'll talk about this subject a little bit more in a few seconds. Next slide. Now let's take a look at the physics of sound for a brief moment. The definition of sound is vibrations that propagates as an audible wave of pressure through a transmission medium such as gas, liquid, or solid. Now, our book talks about two types of radio sound waves, analog and digital. Analog recordings make equivalent physical representation of sound waves on a physical object such as a disc or magnetic tape. Now, versus digital recordings are made by taking thousands of samples of analog signals with a number for each sample representing the size or strength of that signal at the moment. Next slide. On a sound note, when you talk about surround sound is created by the split of the waves. Now, in the early 80s, CDs hit the market and became extremely popular. I remember when CDs came, everybody was excited about owning a CD. They cost a little bit more than tapes or albums, but it seemed to be worth it, the trade-off. Your CD didn't get destroyed as easily as tapes, but if you got a scratch on your CD, then you found yourself in a bit of a pickle. CDs were able to provide a better quality sound than your tapes, and like I said before, they're almost indestructible. The limitation of the CD, however, was that it could only hold so much information, and at the speed at which audio could be broadcasted was slow. Then we had the MP3 player, which came along, and it's titled the MPEG-1 Audio Layer 3. Ooh, I did not know that. Or the MP3 player. The developers of this technology were able to compress the sound, which allowed the shrinking of audio files. So now with your MP3 player, you're able to make playlists and listen to music, almost as long as you prefer to listen to music, for hours and hours on end. And then with the technology of smartphones and our different devices, now it's even more so that music is available to us by a myriad of means. You have online and you have streaming and so forth and so on. Next slide. So with today's technology, as I just mentioned, you have on-demand. And on-demand streaming services allows users to specify a particular song or artist and immediately hear it. It allows the listener to build a personal playlist. And they can use on-demand offline, so they don't have to have Wi-Fi or be connected in order to hear their favorite music. The limitation with on-demand is that the storage capacity of the device that you're listening to your music on. With live streaming, however, live streaming is the live transmission or programming over the internet. It's provided as a service. And some of the times you can get it for free, but with the free live streaming comes ads, advertisements, and commercials. And if that tends to break up your music and it irritates you, then you could pay a subscription fee and not have to worry about interruptions. You can just keep listening to your music as you would like to listen to it. The limitation is advertising, like I said, unless you pay for the subscription fee. Next slide. Satellite radio. Now we have where the sound waves go up into space, they hit the satellite and they come down to your radio or your car. What I love about satellite radio, and I am a subscriber, is that no matter what state I cross, no matter where I go, I get to hear whatever broadcast that I want to hear. If I want to hear my favorite R&B or my favorite gospel or my favorite alternative music, I just put on my favorite satellite radio station and ride out. And that, I absolutely love that part of technology nowadays. Next slide. The evolution of the audio. So we have the bands, the live music, you know, back in the day. Then you had the music on vinyl, which were your records, your 45s and your 33s. Woo, I'm telling on myself just a little bit. Then you had the radio gramophone, the tape recorder. Then you nowadays, we're getting into modern technology. You have the music center. Everybody had to have the speakers and the receivers and your boombox. Then it evolved to the CD player. Now we have the MP3 player and our smartphone devices. Next slide. What's next for the future of the radio? Next slide. Well, we have Next Radio, FM radio for your smartphone. And if you did not know that that technology is out there, it is. Most smartphones are equipped to have a FM radio broadcast. The smartphones are equipped with an FM receiver, and it does not use up battery power. It doesn't use data, and it's available when the towers go down. So if you can't get a signal for your other apps and programs on your smart device, no worries, your FM radio station still works. The only thing is that you have to contact your local provider and see if you can activate your FM receiver. Next slide. Radio and the web. So now radio stations are feeling as if they have, they need interactive websites. You know, it's all about entertainment nowadays. And most radio stations, as I just said, are branding themselves as entertainment packages. Next slide. So there you have it, folks. My question, I guess I'm going to leave it with you is, how do you feel like radio impacted your life? For me, I love music. I started off as a music major. I studied music at a private university for a year. I didn't stick with it because it's always been a part of my life. It's been in our family. My grandmother played the piano. My mother played the piano. I have a slew of family members who sing. So music has always been there. So the radio for me is like an extension of my right hand. How has it impacted your life, and how does it make you feel today? Thanks again for listening. My name is Yolanda Goff, and I'll see you next time.